Good morning people, and this morning we're going to be talking about my W211 and why it's broken down. There's not going to be any burnouts in this video, so I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we do have one very burnt injector. So this car had a little issue in the fact that every time I tried to accelerate and get up to any sort of speed, I could hear a slight tapping noise. And also I was getting a little bit of uneven idle on startup, but it didn't break down, no excessive signs of carbon, nothing greatly amiss, fuel consumption seemed fine, so investigation is further required. Right, to explain what I've done so far, which you guys haven't seen, yesterday when I brought the car in, I needed to get all the injectors out. So I'm going to go through the kind of tools that you guys at home are going to need if you're going to undertake a challenge like this, because this is kind of one of the Achilles heels of the 613 and the 648 engines. They are super strong, they aren't covered in plastic like many other common rail engines, but they do suffer with the injector seals going at the bottom of the injector and then causing damage to the injector body. So let's have a look at that then. What I've done first, obviously, I've given the area a little bit of a clean, as you can probably see. I've unplugged all the injector plugs, and you can see, first of all, we've got a couple of clips missing from some of the injector plugs where people have been at it before. There was a cable tie around this one. Now, this is my daily driver, and to be fair, this engine in the past 40,000 miles has been very, very good. All I've done is replace the tensioners and the water pump, and they didn't let me down. I could hear them making noise, I could tell it was starting to lose a little coolant, and I replaced them. But that aside, this car's been very good. I'm averaging sort of 40 miles per gallon pretty much all the time, and that's UK gallon, 4.55 litres. And very comfortable, very smooth, and I use it every single day. And I can't remember exactly what it cost me, but it was very cheap. I think this car was probably like 250 or 500 quid, however many years ago. So we can't complain too much, can we, about the cost of parts if we need them. Right, so most of the injectors came out with the use of a pry bar. So the injectors obviously sit down using a collar like this that goes onto the injector like that. The injector sits down into this hole like that, and then a bolt like this holds it down. Now these bolts are partly, personally I think, are partly the reason as to this failure that we're having. They're only an M6 and a stretch bolt, and I'm sure under all the perfect conditions the design was probably just on the money. However, as they're getting older, they're not quite cutting it. So this one, this example at 240,000 miles, has had a failure. Oh well, we can live with that, can't we? So I managed to pull 5 of the injectors out just using the regular method of a pry bar, like this. So basically, I know it sounds a bit naughty, but you kind of get the pry bar under that edge and you're just going to pry it up and it'll pop out. Now generally, if you give the injector a twist, that'll loosen it enough, and then you only need to use moderate pressure with the pry bar. So that was all good for 5, apart from one of them, and that was number 2. As you can see, I've taken these injectors out. I've actually numbered the bodies so I know which one was potentially an issue. So number 2, the one that I've shown you that's terribly burnt. Now if we compare that against what a normal one looks like, I'll try and hold these really still for you. Look at that. I mean, that isn't like saltwater corrosion. Look at this nozzle cap compared to this one. It's completely eroded away. Totally cracked on the side of the body. This section of the body here, the steel's completely eroded. Now, I'm in two minds as to what causes this. Obviously, the copper washer that sits on the bottom of here fails. It's a combination of the bolt not holding the injector down tight enough onto the copper washer and the copper washer itself. And then a lot of heat and compression in the cylinder is going to be coming up past this nozzle. Now, is it going to be enough heat that it's going to cause that, you know, to actually be torched like it's been burnt in a fire for many, many, many hours? I suppose it could. Or do we have some kind of like, potentially some sort of chemical reaction going on? You know, like NOx or, I don't know, answers on a postcard. Because I'm not really 100% sure. I know what's causing it, what's happening in the first place with the bolt failing and that leaking, but to see that amount of damage without some obvious signs of wear or vibration or strange, very strange. And all the surrounding area, by the way, in the cylinder head, if I show you in there with a torch, is fine. You're going to obviously see the base inside there has been recut, so that looks particularly smooth. But you can see that's not all burnt up. So an interesting one, that, isn't it? Is there something in the carbon that's actually collecting around the injector nozzle and causing some sort of erosion? Don't know. Strange one. Anyway, right, let's move on to the tools that you're going to need, or that I needed to do this job. Right, over to the workbench. Right, let's talk about some of the things you're going to need to actually complete this task. So, as I mentioned before, one of the injectors got badly stuck and I couldn't get it out. And normally when you put a spanner on the top of this, you know, injector, you can twist it and actually free it off. Well, when I twisted this particular one, this one that was in such a bad shape, the actual nut that holds the injector together on the top, that actually holds the solenoid section in, came loose, which was not ideal. So I had a few spare injectors and I thought, well, this one's probably toast anyway. It's not normal that nut just comes loose. So we've probably got something more amiss. So what I ended up doing is completely unscrewing the top off the injector, like that. And then I took, this is my slide hammer. My slide hammer has a 22mm thread on the end. And I basically use truck wheel nuts because I'm an ex-truck man, aren't I? Bit of a hammer man, hitting things, being rough. Took a truck wheel nut and I welded on the top cap of a spare injector, basically. Now, I know that isn't something every man and his dog is going to be able to do at home, but that's what I did because I know that it's going to work. So you could always do a similar thing, you know, buy an old common rail injector, cut it up, whatever. Anyway, so welded a nut on there, and then I was able to screw this onto my slide hammer. I was able to screw this onto the top of the seized-in injector that was in the car, wind it down, and slide hammer it out. Because nothing usually beats the slide hammer, let's be honest. Right, so once that injector was out, I could actually have a look inside and see what was going on in the cylinder and see in the actual injector socket, you know, at the bottom there. So I got all the old copper washers out, brodled with some welding wire, just a simple piece that I bent a hook on the end. Got all the injector washers out, and then at the bottom, what I could see, use this old bit of paper. What I could see when I looked down the hole, if we were looking directly down the hole, and you can imagine this hole is where that goes through, and then this sort of area here is where the copper washer sits. So that's like a giant picture of a copper washer. There was like a groove here, and a groove here. So there were signs that somebody had in the past been in there to try and obviously fix a similar issue. And what people tend to do, if a copper washer gets stuck into the cylinder head, rather than taking the time and making something to actually like hook between and pop it up, you can be really roughy-tufty and take a screwdriver and literally smack down on it with a screwdriver, and it'll often pop the copper washer up. Now, what it looked like in this particular case is maybe they thought the copper washer was in there and it actually wasn't, and they were actually just chiseling at the cylinder head. So that's why this particular injector was leaking so bad, a bad previous repair. Could have been a failed injector. Anyway, so what do we do in that scenario? Right, so once that has happened, you basically need a little kit like this. Now, I got this kit from eBay, I think, and I have found that even though the bottom of the injector is about 17 mil, that the washer surface area is about 15. So I've labelled this one 613, and it's got a flat cutting head, and basically all you do is you put that on there with the Allen key, put it on there, and then you get given this T-bar. Now what you do with that T-bar is you throw that straight in the bin. You're never going to need that. That is torture. And you're going to take your electric gun, put on a 19mm socket, because that's what size this fitment is, on there, and you're going to push this down into the hole, you know, the one that's in question. Now, I did all of mine. I recut all of mine just so that they were all nice and flat. But you sit that in there like that, and then basically, I'm not going to do it now because they're all nice and smooth, but you basically spin that and push down. And I used a little bit of cutting fluid, like you would on a drill bit or whatever, just to make sure it made a nice job. Then, after I'd done that, I looked in with a torch. Okay, it needs a little bit more, and I just kept doing it until it was perfectly smooth in the bottom there. And then, with a shop vac, you know, waterproof vacuum, and an airline, I kind of blew and sucked and blew and sucked. I'm sure most of you have done that. Anyway, so once that was nice and smooth, I repeated the steps on the others. They didn't need as much work. They only needed a little tickle as opposed to that one. Now, technically, if you want to get painful and you want to do it right, you technically should measure how much you've taken off, how much material has been removed, and then replace that by using a thicker copper washer. Now, that's going to be pretty difficult to do. First of all, you're going to have to get a datum from something, which ideally needs to be the piston crown, because that is really the distance between the end of the injector and the piston crown is really the key thing when we're altering injector height. And most people aren't going to do that at home. My advice on this particular matter is, because you're probably going to be doing this at home, is don't worry, just put the new washers in, put it in. If you can go a bit thicker on the copper washer sizes, if you've got an option at your local supply, then perhaps do that. But personally, in my experience, there isn't a great deal of concern. Right, so what have we covered so far? The tools, the special tools that you've needed, you've used your TIG welder that you've got at home, and you've made your slide hammer, which you also have at home. You've then taken your injector seat cutter, which of course you have at home, and then you've obviously used your industrial shop vacuum and your airline, which you've got at home. So far, this is going to be a piece of cake, isn't it? I'm not trying to make this sound painful, I'm just giving you the reality of it. Oh, this is my little Broadley thing. You know the thing I was telling you about getting the washers out of the hole? Little bit of welding wire, which I've made a point on the end. And it's got a twisty bit on the end so I can actually... Right, so then the next issue you've got is obviously that injector that I've taken out was shot. And the reason why this car's in here in the first place is because it was starting to get a little bit more lumpy at idle. And as I'd accelerate, you know, onto a motorway or something, you could just hear it like an exhaust gasket going, just ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. So I knew there was something wrong. I have checked the exhaust gasket, it wasn't that, and I was like, it's going to be the injectors. And to be honest, on this one, there wasn't much carbon telltale. Right, so what to do next? What someone had done. I'm sorry, this is quite long and painful, isn't it? There is a lot to this. So, again, another cheeky repair that someone had done on this car. Look at these tie downs. So these obviously are the ones that hold the injectors down. Look at this bad boy. Look at the size of the hole in it compared to the rest. That is literally the John Wayne of injector tie downs, that isn't it? So basically what somebody's done is, at some point, I think they've snapped one of these M6 bolts, or they've had an issue with a bolt and not had another one to replace it. So what they've done, which is kind of like clever but wrong. I knew it was on the floor somewhere. It wasn't like purposely there. Look at this. Now you've got to bear in mind that these bolts are really long for a reason. They actually reach through, get my torch out. Professional, always has a torch in his top pocket. They reach through the rocker cover, so they go right through the rocker cover all the way down, quite deep, into the cylinder head itself. And then they are clamping the rocker cover, which is aluminium, not plastic, down to the cylinder head and that tie down and the injector. This person who repaired this, I'm not saying it was a bad repair because I've done 40,000 miles in this car. God knows how long it's been like this before. But this person who repaired this one has literally helicoiled the actual rocker cover. Look at this. So literally they've put a helicoil straight into the rocker cover there. So that isn't pulling down on the cylinder head. That is literally the rocker cover holding the injector down. That particular cylinder didn't even have any issue. Like, that had no carbon blow-by, leaking, nothing. That one was absolutely spot on. So that goes to show you how strong a Mercedes rocker cover is. You can literally helicoil it and then use it to hold down your injectors. So hats off to Mercedes on that one. However, I'm not going to put that back in because it's naughty. And luckily, all of the threads in mine are actually fine. So I'm going to just replace the original M6 bolts. Now back over to the workbench. Now if, this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use 6 new Mercedes bolts and I'm going to torque them to the correct amount. I can't actually remember the correct amount because I can't, but I'll put it up on screen. So torque those to the correct amount with those new copper washers, put that back together, and that's going to be mint. Oh, and I'm going to use a used injector that I happen to have. You might have to buy a new injector. That injector that came out was totally shot. However, if you guys have experienced a situation where the threads have been ripped out, it's going to be seriously difficult to helicoil deep down into the cylinder head with the rocker cover on, and I don't recommend doing what Mr. Naughty did, even though it did work. So, what I like to do, and this is something that I used to do back even in the main dealerships to repair this situation, change from an M6 bolt to an M7 bolt. So if we go across to here, we literally can take a long drill bit, drill down, drill out the remains of the old threads. You can then insert an M7 tap, and then you can replace the original tie-down bolts, which are M6, with these beefy M7s. Look at the difference. Now, I'm pretty confident, because of doing this a long time ago, a lot of times in the past, that that is not going to fail you. Unless there's some other situation, like, you know, someone's chiseled where the injector sits, then of course it's going to fail. As long as they've been recut properly using the tools and the method that I've just sort of said, with a replacement bolt like that, if you need to, I think that's going to last forever. So that kit, when I have time, I will put on the shop, the drill bit, the tap, and those oversized bolts. I will also put on the site these smaller, the regular bolts, just the normal repair method. However, the injector seat cutters, I'm not really sure. Mine is just an eBay kit. It's not the highest quality thing in the world. So until I can actually produce something a bit nicer, I'm not going to obviously sell those. You can buy those on eBay. Just type in Mercedes injector seat cutter. And the one that you want to be using in that is the, did I say 15.5 mil? Yeah. It's the 15.5 by 15.5. That's what it says. And it's got a flat end, literally like a flat cutting surface. So I hope this has been somewhat educational for you today. Obviously, if this happens to you, make sure that you have another car to use for a couple of days, because you're going to probably have to order an injector. So before you take it all apart, make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. Is there anything else I want to mention? Oh, yeah, one other thing. I'm replacing the injector return line, because the old injector return line on mine's all covered in carbon and a mess. And if I'd have had some, I would have probably replaced those injector plugs. But I'll leave that for another day. I'll probably have to put a cable tie back on it, because I'm naughty like that, and it's my daily driver. Right, I hope you've enjoyed it. A little insight into the common rail. It's not a bad engine. That's pretty much its main Achilles heel. So if we can get over this, then I think we're on to a winner. Right, I better put it back together, otherwise I'm going to have to go home in the Discovery again, and I don't want to do that. This is far more comfortable. I've buttoned it up, new return line's on, the old crusty one is off. Obviously all these parts, the injectors, the lines and everything were all cleaned in the ultrasonic cleaner, so that's why it's all looking nice and clean. This broken plug, I have asked our parts department to order some new plugs in, but I've just literally had to do that as a temporary measure until the new one comes. So hopefully, as soon as I get some of those plugs in, we're going to put them on the website, and then if you have that issue, you don't have to use cable ties temporarily like I did. But anyway, it's only one, should just start. So let's see if it'll actually run. So I've tightened all these up, torqued the bolts down for the injectors. Return line's on. Nothing's caught in the fan. Right, let's do it. I'm going to need keys. I will mention something now, actually, because there will be people screaming at the keyboard saying, "You've put a new injector in, you haven't coded it in, the trim codes aren't in." I don't care. Right. Right, so once you've got it started, things to look for now, things to be careful of. Obviously you're looking for any leaks on your diesel pipes. Remember, this is a high pressure common rail system. It is dangerous. Don't go putting your finger around the ends of the pipes, checking for leaks. Have a visual look if it's leaking, turn it off, and then have a closer look. High pressure common rail, be careful with it. It can inject through your skin and into your bloodstream, it's dangerous. I think it's nearing a road test.
Normal to have that much smoke coming out?
It's just from brake cleaner and oil and stuff. You can make it go away with the airline. See, it's gone now. All gone. Yeah, there's quite a bit down the back, which is just... Yeah, I'm going to suck some of that leaky diesel off when I pulled the injector return line off. I'm going to suck that up because I don't really want to be smoking the road out. Well, that 6th injector worked nice anyway. 6th injector.
You've not road tested it yet?
It runs, it idles, so it's good. Do you think I should talk a little bit about trim codes and the thing that I just sort of rejected on camera? The trim codes, when I talked about coding an injector in, basically on all injectors you have a trim code, and that trim code allows you to tell the ECU how sort of out of calibration or how the trim of the injector is set. You know, let's put it really basically. Let's say this injector squirts 81 cc of fuel and this injector squirts 83 cc of fuel. The code on the top at a selected opening time, the code on the top will tell the ECU the difference between that injector and that injector so that it knows how to compensate for it. So if this one squirts a little bit more fuel than this one, well, it will only open that one for a shorter period of time than that one. However, a lot of big diesel companies, diesel tuning companies that build injectors and things, they actually all build their injectors to a set code. So they try and fine-tune all their injectors so they're exactly the same, so that only one trim code needs to be used, which in my head is like the better way of doing it. But for the purposes of this, and if you guys are at home and you've bought an injector and it's from a good quality company, generally you can get away with just buying it, banging it in, and it causing no issues. If you are concerned, yes, I'll go through the trim codes and how to adjust them in a later video. I have all the equipment here to do that, but I think that is a different section of the video, and certainly not something we need to do for this. Plus, the other issue is that old injector that I've put in has come out of a car that's probably done 200,000 miles as well. So do you realistically think that the trim codes and the adjustment and the calibration data is going to be on point to actually mess with the calibration that it's already in here? No, probably not. It's probably going to be no better with that information from when that injector was new. Just don't like the way that pipe's sat. I'm almost tempted to actually change that pipe. I think that pipe's been strained a few times. Stand clear. Ta-da! A lot of diesel everywhere. I wonder what's leaking. Oh, a spider. Right, so you probably saw that the road test wasn't a complete success. And what's the point in hiding that from you? This shit does sometimes go wrong, and it's good to see how to sort it if it does. So, first issue is, when I brought it in, you probably saw that everything was covered in diesel quite badly. Now, it was impossible, because the diesel leak was so extreme, it was impossible to see where the diesel was coming from. So, my little trick of the trade, if you just get some blue roll, some tissue, and wrap it round each one of the injector pipe ends, you'll end up with a wet one where the actual diesel's coming from. Now that is the rogue injector that's come out of the spares box. So I'm hoping it isn't that that's the problem, and that it is these high pressure lines. Now, partly one of the reasons here of the failure is you are supposed to replace the high pressure lines every time you do a task like this. The main reason being contamination, because obviously they don't want small contaminants getting into the injectors and ruining them. And the secondary reason is that they do wear, and this is a really high pressure system. So for a safety point of view. Now, again, this is my daily driver that cost me 250 quid. Am I really going to go spending £450 on a new injector? No, probably not. And am I going to likely spend however much on the pipe? Yes, I probably should have done. So that pipe, I think the ferrule may be worn. Anyway, I have another second-hand one, so I'm going to try another second-hand one in a minute. I have ordered a new one. Now the other issue that I had that I noticed is, even though while this was all full of diesel, it might have been a blessing in disguise really. While this was all full of diesel, I saw compression blowing up past this cylinder. Now, this cylinder didn't have any leak or didn't have any issue before, cylinder number 5, but it did have this weird helicoil fitted that I told you about. So I wonder if when I have actually fastened the injector down and I've torqued it up, I think that there could have potentially been debris that I haven't quite managed to clear out of the bottom of the bolt hole. So, like I showed you in the kits earlier, I have a long M6 tap for the standard bolts, and I am going to put that in there and I'm going to run it down and see if I can get anything out of that hole, because there's obviously something stopping that bolt going down. The injector seat is clean and it's flat, so there's no reason that the washer shouldn't have sealed. So my only suggestion or thought is that the actual injector isn't pulled down tight because the bolt has bottomed out on some dirt or rubbish before it's actually got to that point. So I'm going to go down this thread again with the tap and try and absolutely clean it out thoroughly, and then we're going to try again. It's all good fun, isn't it? If these were all brand new components, this would all be very easy and straightforward. But they're not. It's an old engine, it's done a lot of miles. Right, so I'm going to finish off this, then I'm going to probably just tickle that seat once more. I don't think I'll need to, I only ran it for a few minutes, but I don't like the thought of that blow by. So I'll just give it another little clean with the drill, and then I'll stick the injector in, I'll put the new pipe on there, and then we'll try again. We'll get there. We'll get there. Bye for now. So it's back together again, and I think I've nailed it this time. You can see we've got all of our turbines in place, so we can find out if there is any leakage in the injector line connections. So to recap what I've done then, this injector, obviously I took it out, I cleaned the threads with a tap, but upon inspection of the tip of the injector, on this end of the injector, there was a nick. It's obviously not this injector, but there was a little nick in the end. So I thought, that could have been why there's been a little bit of blow by there. And that might have been why they've used that bigger bolt to try and squash it down and stop it from leaking. So, what I did is, using my cheapy eBay kit, no, we didn't need that anyway. Using the cheap eBay kit, I actually, I put the injector in the vise like this. Come here closer so you can see it. And then I took one of these bits that are designed to cut the cylinder head. I placed it down on the injector like that, and then literally with this, I just gave it a tickle like that, and as you can see, it's cleaned the injector up. Now you can see I've just had that cockeyed on a bad angle and blah blah blah, and it's only done a bit, but you get the idea. I basically did that with that injector, being careful, and ground it down until there was no groove left. Obviously, it was only a very, very tiny groove. Again, as we mentioned before, technically you should be making up whatever material you take off there, you should be making it with your washer, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's all back together. The injector pipe here that was leaking, the one that was leaking onto this injector, I took it off, I wire wheeled it, I put it back on again, and now it doesn't leak, which is good. So, what we're going to do now, just to check that this doesn't work, obviously they're all tied on there. I'm going to start the engine up. All clear. And I'm going to place this above. And this will tell you if there's any gas shooting up past the injector. Can't see any so far. I'll give it a little rev and we'll see if it causes any drama. So you keep your eye on the tissue. Nothing. And then we can do it again on the front ones. Exactly the same. Nothing? Did it blow up at all?
Slightly, but it could have been the wind.
Where did you see it blowing?
It kind of lifted slightly there and a little bit there.
From the fan, maybe?
Maybe, that's what I mean.
Should we try again, just to be certain? I don't like the sound of a maybe. I was watching it from here and I didn't see anything. Right. No, I didn't see anything at all. No. What you would have seen if it had been blowing up, it'd have been surrounding the injector itself here, pushing up.
Not the ends.
Yeah, not the ends. So we're quite confident that obviously this is not a thorough road test. It wants to be taken out on the road, but this is a nice preliminary. I can never say preliminary. I can never say it. It's a nice test before you go out. Initial test before you go out on the road and soak all the underneath and undertray and everything in diesel. And also, if you look at all these, we've got no leaks on any of them. So that's also a really good sign. So I'm happy. I think it's fixed. I'm going to take it for another road test. But if you don't hear from me again, and this is the end of the video, either one of two things happened. Either it's fixed and I'm happy, or it isn't fixed and I've set fire to it. Bye for now.